Lee Picture.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Those 3 lines on my shirt are NHS. The joy of holding a brolly over a Barbie on another washed-out bank holiday Monday, that sweet smell of fish and chips on a Friday, a whippy on the beach, strawberries and cream at Wimbledon, His Majesty the King, the pageantry of Trooping of the Colour, Nil Point at Eurovision, FIFA Ultimate Team, Strictly at Christmas, a Gavin Stacey special, Monty Python, that Jerry Halliwell dress, Phil Mitchell, James Bond, KSI, Corgis, Larry the Cat, Anton Deck, accents having that main character energy. And still. Still is what Yorkshire tea and Yorkshire puds are to God's own county, what the hot pot is to Lancashire, and what black cabs are to London. It's about us, it's about what makes us, it's about what drives us. It's about pride. And before I come on to amendments, New Clause 12 and 4, and amendments 20 and 7, which I'm against today, I want to begin with Martin Welch. Today marks 48 years since Martin began working at Scunthorpe Steelworks, and he is now its longest-serving employee, 48 years. That is 48 years of skill, graft and loyalty to an industry that has helped build this country. Martin has also been a champion of safety for his co-workers, standing up for the people doing difficult, skilled and sometimes dangerous work. When we debate steel, we are debating people like Martin. Families like his, communities whose working lives, pride and futures are bound up within the future of British steel. Taken together, a number of the amendments before us today expose the central choice facing the House. Are we serious about protecting a strategic British industry, or are we going to wrap government action in so many conditions, caps, delays and automatic routes back to private sale that intervention becomes impossible in practice? That is the choice. No one in this debate is arguing that public money should be spent carelessly. No one is arguing that compensation should be unfair. No one is arguing that taxpayers should sign a blank cheque. Of course, value for money matters. Of course, proper scrutiny matters. Of course, government must act competently, transparently and responsibly. But there is a difference between scrutiny and paralysis. And I fear that some of the amendments before us today cross that line. A strategic industry cannot always be saved on a timetable designed for paperwork rather than production. When blast furnaces, skills, orders and an entire industrial community at risk, government must be able to move. That is not recklessness, that is leadership. New Clause 12 would be unnecessary and restrictive. Amendment 20 would slow the urgent work needed to save and reinvigorate our steel sector. The amendments would impose rigid caps on support that impose rigid caps on support may sound prudent, but they risk being arbitrary. The amendments that would delay assistance until further processes have been completed may sound reasonable, but they risk leaving government too slow to act when speed is essential. That is why we have to be clear about the principle that we have at stake in front of us. This bill is not nationalisation for the sake of nationalisation. It's public ownership in the public interest. Manage risk, removing inefficiency in process, reducing obstacles that would slow the urgent work needed to save and reinvigorate our steel sector. And public interest should be the test. Not ideology, not habit, not an automatic knee-jerk assumption that private ownership is always the answer, or that public ownership must only be temporary. And that test is, simple. And what we need to ask is, what protects the national interests, the workforce, the community, and Britain's long-term industrial capability? And if that is public ownership, we should have the confidence to say so. If that is a long-term British industrial partner, we should consider it at the right time. But we should not hardwire into law an assumption that the endpoint must always be sold back into private hands. And that is exactly the thinking that has left too many British assets vulnerable in the first place. Of course, I'll give way.
I thank the Honourable Friend for giving away that point. He's making an excellent speech. And he just really made the point that I wanted to make, which is we can't make an ideological decision, surely, that it is always right to put national assets of sovereign capacity back into the private sector, when, in the case of the steel industry, we've seen over generations a singular failing of the private industry to see the steel industry flourish. Does he agree?
Thank you for his intervention. I absolutely agree. This is not about heritage. It's not about the sentimental value of steel. That is important, of course, and it means something to people in their hearts. But with a business brain, this is just about doing the right thing for that industry, for our country, for our people, for our communities. Quite right. Steel is part of who we are. It's in the homes we need to build, the railways we need to renew, the energy infrastructure we need to deliver, and the defence capability we need to protect our country. It is also in the skilled work, pride and industrial strength of communities that have already given more than enough to Britain. So this debate is not only about steelworks, it's about whether Britain is prepared to act like a serious industrial nation again. For too long, we've been too casual about losing the things that make us strong. Factories, skills, supply chains, ownership, industrial capacity. We've allowed strategic British assets to pass out of British hands and then pretended that ownership does not matter. It absolutely does. In Dunscroft, Hatfield, Rosington, Thorne and Morens, people know what happens when a major industry is allowed to collapse. They do not need a lecture in industrial policy. They've lived through it. Their families have lived through it. Their towns still live with the consequences. The loss of coal mining was not just an economic event, it was a social rapture. It damaged local economies because it damaged confidence, it damaged pride and the sense that the country valued the people and the places that powered it. And that damage is still visible 40 years later. So when people say that the government intervention is too bold, too risky or too ambitious, I say they need to look at the cost of not acting. Doing nothing is not free. It costs jobs, it costs skills, supply chain resilience, industrial communities and national capabilities. It leaves Britain less able to build, less able to defend itself and less able to stand on its own 2 feet. That's not prudence, that is managed decline. And I did not come into this place, into politics, to manage decline. This bill says that when a foundational industry is at risk, when thousands of skills are at stake and when national resilience is on the line, government does not have to stand aside and hope the market sorts it out, because the market has not sorted this out. Decades of decline, underinvestment and foreign ownership have brought us to this point. The choice before us is not between some perfect private sector solution and public ownership. The real choice is between responsible public action now and allowing a vital national capability to just disappear. We cannot allow that. So some amendments before us today seem to start from the idea that government intervention is danger. I disagree. The danger is delay and timidity. The danger is pretending that rigid caps, lengthy processes and automatic routes back to private sale are the same thing as responsibility. Managed risk is not recklessness. Managed risk is leadership. If we keep doing the same safe things, we'll keep getting the same safe results. Those results are the decline that people keep voting for us to change, the change that I came to this House to be proud of. This is a time to be bold. This is a time to step up. This is a time to take well-managed risks in the public's interest. There is a time to seize the bloody obvious and deliver for the country. And this is one of those times. So for the workers at Scunthorpe, for the families across my constituency who depend on those jobs, for the industrial communities that know exactly what happens when government walks away, and for the future strength of this country, I support this bill. Britain needs steel, Britain needs British assets in British hands, and Britain needs a government with the confidence to act in the national interest. This bill is a welcome step in the right direction. It turns the tide on 40 years of ideological self-sabotage. That is why amendments that would delay, dilute, cap, arbitrarily or force a route back to failed models should be resisted. And that is why this bill deserves the support of the House today.